This is episode 106 of the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I'm Carly Cade, and today I'm talking with Valerie Power. Valerie is a lifelong horse lover and a California native. She has had a varied career that includes photographing pearl farms in Asia and running an underground performance art circus. She now lives with her husband at their off-grid homestead in the high desert of San Diego County. Valerie's Equestrian Suspense Series takes readers to Fairy Glen, a horsewoman's paradise. Despite the rumors of the ghosts, witches, and spectral animals that haunt the woods in Fairy Glen, her female characters are more concerned with solving crimes and saving the day. Saddle up for a conversation about horses, mystery, thrills, and a touch of the supernatural. Now, let's get into the interview. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast, a podcast featuring interviews with equestrian authors who love all things horses and writing about them. In each episode, you'll hear inspirational stories from horsebook authors, including writing advice and marketing tips to help you write your very own horsebook. If you're an author, aspire to be an author, or simply love horsebooks, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Carly Cade, and creative writing makes my spurs jingle. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I'm Carly Cade, and today I'm speaking with author Valerie Power. Welcome to the show, Valerie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. We're going to talk about the best things on earth, horses, and writing books about them. And as people who listen to the show or anybody that's a newcomer, how I always like to start the conversation off is talking to the authors about how their relationship with horses began or how horses have inspired their life. So Valerie, can you share a little bit about the horses in your life with us?
One of my first memories of really being inspired by horses is when my mom took me to see the Black Stallion in the theater. And I think I was about 7 years old when that came out. And I just remember the imagery of the little black horse statue being uncovered by the sand. And then, of course, the time on the island with Alec and the Black Stallion, and just that, wanting to be him so badly. And I've always read about horses. I read all the Black Stallion books and any other horse books. I got a photography book of horses when I was little for one of my birthdays, I think, and that really inspired me. I learned all the different breeds. I read everything I possibly could, probably like everybody else that's listening right now. And, everything from like trying to turn a chair in my room into a horse with like a bridle made out of belts and things like that. So, but I lived in the suburbs, so I had to have imaginary horses for a while until I actually found a riding stable through my best friend's older brother's girlfriend, who was quite an accomplished rider, and she was really cool. And she took us to see where she rode and her trainer. And so Jennifer and I got riding lessons finally when I was about 10 years old. My riding instructor was just the absolute best, taught us everything from trail riding to riding without stirrups and reins in the arena, jumping, dressage, barrel racing just for fun. We did showing. I think horses really spoke to me because of their power and the freedom that they give you. Just being on top of a horse, there's nothing like that in the world.
Melt my heart on all those touch points. The Black Stallion, I know that childhood feeling of like, just, wow, I want that experience with a horse. In fact, I still have my Black Stallion movie picture book on my shelf from when I was a kid. You've had a very interesting career path. When I was galloping around your website, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so she's done a lot of interesting things. You've photographed pearl farms in Asia, and you've run an underground performance art circus. Talk to us a little bit about how your career path prepared you for the next step, which was becoming an author.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned photography in there. So I studied art in college. I then kind of majored in photography. I fell in love with photography the first class I took, doing the dark room and all that stuff. And I always drew horses as a kid, so I was always an artist. I got a real job as a photographer when I moved to Southern California and worked for the Gemological Institute of America, which is a nonprofit educational institute for people that want to study gemstones. Now, I'm not that into gemstones, but my photography interest was what got me there, and I became a photographer. So I worked in the publishing department that produced all their coursework. And I did photography at gem shows and in the studio, taking pictures of diamonds and gemstones and all these interesting mineral specimens. But I also got to take a few trips for when we were revising the course on pearls. And pearls are one of the few gemstones that I'm really, really into. And they're also my birthstone. So that was just amazing to me. And one of the things when I was a kid and just imagining, crazy careers, I was like, I could be a pearl farmer. And then I thought it was so just perfect that I got to go and photograph these pearl farms. In Japan was one trip that I took, where we went to Japan, which is where they developed the cultured pearl, and then Australia. And then a second trip was to China. So that was really amazing. It's almost like a different planet to be in China, actual China itself. I think what helped me from that experience was more working in the publishing department, seeing I was a photographer, but I was part of this big machine where there was the writers, the subject matter experts, the editors, the graphic designers, all of that. And it all came together to produce this book and this educational information for people. And so I guess I realized that there's always going to be revisions. There's always you can have 10 sets of eyes look at something and you're always going to find a mistake. You just make a note of it for the next time you do the print run, In the circus thing, that's a whole other offshoot. So in 2004, I had just been divorced, and I ended up going to Burning Man in the desert outside of Reno. And that kind of changed my life too. So I got involved in the Burning Man community locally. I met my future husband, who was running this circus in his backyard in downtown San Diego. And I was like, I like unusual things. So I became a big fan. And eventually we ended up dating and getting together. And I had never been into drama or anything in high school. I was way too shy. And I was like, I'm not a performer. I'm an artist, but I'm not a performer. It's kind of like a variety, vaudeville variety type show. And he had this one act he did that was a shadow puppet story. And I told him one time, I said, that's my favorite of your acts. And he said, well, why don't you do one? And so I ended up kind of getting sucked into the performing side of it through shadow puppetry, which kind of gave me the opportunity to entertain people without being in the spotlight, because I was behind the screen. So with shadow puppetry, the way I did it, you cut out these outlines out of like black paper or whatever, and you project light from behind. And then I would write a story and pre-record it, narrate it, and then perform it with the little puppets. And the first time that I heard the audience laugh at a joke that I made, I was hooked. Oh. And I realized that, I don't know, there's just this energy and connection you get with the audience when you're performing that I was like, that's the best thing in the world. And so I think through that, I gained a lot of maybe confidence, or just realization that you can put yourself out there and people will like what you're doing. So just getting back into writing stories. I mean, they were short little stories. It was like 7 or 10 minutes or something. But I had always written stories, but I was like, oh, okay, I can write stories. And then, so that kind of led into kind of a synergistically, also through my horseback riding, where I was inspired for an idea for a novel. You just do it yourself and you put it out there. So I think that led into more of the self-publishing thing.
Oh, that's perfect. And that is a great segue to get into talking about your books. But first, thank you for sharing this story of those very unique careers, because I mean, there are so many things in the world that we can do that exist that we don't even know, that can feed our creativity and prepare us for, whatever's next in our life in this journey. Like photographing pearls, like who would have thought? That is so neat. And being able to
Right.
travel to Asia and Australia, and then puppetry in a backyard circus, shadow puppetry, and telling stories. I mean, you had a live audience that you could test your writing on and your storytelling on, and you got that feedback and that reaction live, which is so exciting. So
Yeah.
talk to us about your horse books, the Fairy Glen Suspense Series. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration for these books and what led you to writing them.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of different inspirations. The last place that I boarded my horse, I fictionalized that and turned that into Fairy Glen. So it's this place, it's in San Diego County. It's kind of surrounded by the overdevelopment of subdivisions and things like that, but it has somehow maintained this little pocket of nature, and it's got tons of trails, and I just loved having them there. That place also has lots of legends of hauntings and things like that associated with it.
Wow.
So I kind of just ripped that off basically, and that's the setting, but I wanted to change the name. For some reason, I feel very protective about it, but I wanted to change the name a little bit, and also just to give myself artistic license to make it whatever I wanted it to be. I think as a Western horse person, or especially a California horse person, you're always searching for room to ride. And there's that, I guess, conflict between development and leaving enough wild space that we can keep riding. Yeah, so there were all these different just inspirations, and then, like I said, the actual rumors of supernatural that are in that little valley.
No, that's fascinating. Like,
Yes.
I mean, and this is what good fiction is, right? Where does an author write from? They write from experiences they've had in their own lives. Otherwise, what is there? And then we fictionalize it and tell it as a story, right? It's all these little pieces of the moments we've lived in our lives, whether, with our horses or with experiences with other people. And then we bring it in and fictionalize it and turn it into a story. And what would you say would be the ideal reader for your book? And where would you put this on the spectrum of genre? Because it sounds like it's got a lot of different elements in it going on.
I would call it more suspense. I don't think you have to be a horse person to like this book. I think it really does speak to horse people, but there's so many people that loved horses as a kid that, or may just want to vicariously live out, being able to just jump on your horse and ride through the trails, and then that kind of thrill of discovering a crime or being chased by a bad guy, stuff like that. I also have kind of a mother-daughter relationship in there. That's the two main characters are a mother and a daughter, and the daughter is a teenage girl that rides her BMX bike all over the place, and she kind of gets involved with the criminals in a way. And so I think it also kind of appeals to people who maybe like shows like, I don't know, like some of my critique group partners compared it to Twin Peaks, or like Riverdale, maybe, where there's like adults, but there's also teenagers, and there's like intrigue and suspense and crime and
paranormal,
and paranormal all mixed together.
This sounds fascinating.
From the beginning, I had kind of thought of it more as an ensemble cast of characters, because it kind of shares a little bit of traits with the cozy mystery, except it's a little darker, and I do have swear words in my book and stuff, and that's a no-no for cozy, so I can't really call it a cozy. But one of the things with cozies is you have a small town and you've got these quirky characters that you keep coming back to. And so what I'm going to do is each book will kind of focus on a different couple of characters, because nobody can have all that drama month after month. So the main character in the first book, Deirdre Boyd, she is kind of going to be like the hub of the wheel, I think, of the community, the heart of the community. So she'll probably be in every book, but subsequent books will highlight different characters and kind of their development as characters.
That's
So
so smart. I love this. And I totally hear in your talking that you are inspired around this, and that the characters and the stories aren't finished with you yet. That's usually how series happens. Like you'll write a book,
yes,
you intend it to be a standalone, and then all of a sudden the characters are like, the muse is like, no way, you're not done yet. We're gonna keep going. So, and that's great. I mean, that's a great
yeah,
strategy. As an author, because series, people love that. I mean, we are in a binge society, a binge culture. People want to blow through things and read them, and the more books you
right,
have and the more people like your stories and your characters, the longer people stick with you. So that's a
right.
really great strategy coming out of the gate.
I
And
just wish I could write faster.
oh, I hear you. I hear you. That is the one thing. You know what though? I think over the course of a body of work, as long as you're telling a good story, people will stick with you. But yeah,
Mhm.
I'm with you. So
Yeah.
speaking to that, how long does it usually take you to write, say, a first draft?
And the first one took forever because
Mm.
it was like teaching me to write a novel. And I went to courses, I learned online, I found a writing group. So I would say that took me 5 years from when I really started working on it to when it
Mhm.
was finished.
That's
When,
super normal. I will say, as you
yeah,
write
first
more, the
book,
faster it goes. Yes, absolutely.
yeah, right. The second one, I wrote the first draft of it, or most of the first draft during NaNoWriMo. I finished it and revised it and edited it all within, I'd say, 6 months. I gave myself a deadline. I'm the type of person that without a deadline, I could just keep tinkering with something forever. So,
That's great though, but I would say 6 months is not bad. And I think it's always getting over the hurdle of the first, and realizing, oh, hey, I can write a book that people do enjoy. Then it kind of takes away a little bit of that stress. Like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Once you've done something, you can do it. And I don't
yeah,
think it gets faster. It gets a little easier. It never is 100% easy, but having known that you've done it
yeah.
helps you get there a little bit quicker, I think, as you go on in your career. Now, you mentioned a couple times that you chose to go the independent publishing route, self publishing route, and I heard in your conversation that you educated yourself, which I think is so important when you're getting out of the gate as a new author, to make sure you do your work and educate yourself on the process. Why did you choose to go that route?
Well, I actually, over the years that I was learning about the craft of writing, I also started listening to podcasts, and I would say like Joanna Penn's podcast was
She's
really
great.
informational
Hmm.
and inspiring. And and attitudes have changed towards independent publishing. It naturally appealed to me because I have kind of a jack of all trades. Like I have a little bit of skills in all these different things. So I knew the technical aspect, I knew that I could do. And just having the control over it, I actually did. I queried a few agents. I probably queried about maybe 10 or 12 agents. And as I was doing it, I had learned so much over the years about independent publishing, that as I was doing it, I was like, I feel like I'm just doing this to jump through the hoops to check off the box to say that I tried. Not to say that I wouldn't love to be traditionally published, I think, but I I think I'm more suited to doing it myself, doing the independent route. I didn't want to wait for my book to come out. I was ready at that point because I had spent so much time and
Hmm.
been telling people for years and years I'm writing a book, and they're like, "Well, where is it?" No, no, people were super supportive, but after a while, when you say you're doing something, you're like, "Okay, I gotta like produce the goods here."
Yeah, but good
So,
on you. You did it. Do you know how many people say that they're going to do something and they don't actually do it? There's like some crazy
yeah,
statistic out there that says, like, I don't know, 80% of the population says they want to write a book, but only like 3% of people ever actually do, which is,
yeah.
you're one of that 3%, so you should be very proud of yourself.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, and you're
Yeah.
right. You are able to go faster when you take control yourself. I mean, not only do you own your intellectual
Mhm.
property, we make a little bit more in royalties. We
Yes.
have a say over how our book looks and who we're reaching with it. But then there's
Yeah.
that element of we can get books out faster because the
Mhm.
traditional public publishing process is long. I just had Carly Heath on the show, and I
Mhm.
think she had been working on her book since like 2014, and it had just come out, but she went the traditional route.
Mhm.
It's a very informative interview. So you educated yourself and you made the definitive decision. I think independent publishing is for me, and you went that route. How did you celebrate? How do you celebrate your successes in milestones as a writer? Do anything special when you get to that space when you've gotten a book completed? Because it sounds like you've been a creative your whole life. So how do you celebrate your creativity?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a strange feeling to finish a book because you've been working on something for so long and it's like you're pushing so hard against this wall and then all of a sudden the wall is gone and you're like, what do what do I work on? What do I do? So I think I would say, I probably have a margarita and
Nice, nice.
and just relax and give myself permission to not work on writing for a little while just to kind of refill the creative well. Read some books, get some more input,
Mhm.
watch movies, go on trip. I think that's how I kind of celebrate, is just by giving myself a little break, mentally giving myself a little break. Yeah.
That is great advice, and absolutely, you earned that. You worked very hard. It's like sometimes we push so hard, so hard, so hard that we forget to give ourselves permission to rest and celebrate such a big accomplishment. So good on you.
Hmm.
I would buy you that margarita for sure. Now, you have mentioned that, this is a new series. How have you been marketing this book? How are you reaching your readers and getting the word out?
Well, I'd have to say, right, first off, I feel like I'm kind of in this for the long game. So I feel like my readership will build up as I get more and more books and people kind of spread the word through word of mouth.
Mhm.
But I do have a Facebook presence. I just recently did a tutorial online about how to set up Facebook ads, and those are working kind of well so far.
Great.
And I feel like because with Facebook ads, you can target people with certain interests.
Mhm.
And there's one ad, and you can also be more creative with the imagery. You can kind of create your own imagery. It's not just the cover of the book. Yeah, I've been really kind of heartened by that because there's people that they'll comment on your ad because it's like a regular Facebook post, and they'll tag their friends, like, and then come back and say, I just read this, it's really good. And then they'll
Wow.
tag a friend, hey, Carla, try this or whatever. And so that's been really cool. And I realized that, like, marketing, it's definitely a different hat to put on, a different mindset, but it still uses all those creative skills that you have, or those creative juices that you have in your brain of, like, okay, what kind of people, who's my ideal reader and what are they interested in? So of course, people, horseback riding, right?
Mhm.
But then also people who like mysteries, and then, you know just finding different interests to target. I'm kind of like, slowly, I feel like I'm slowly building up this ball that's going to roll downhill and keep rolling faster and faster. you know
Yeah. And
so
that's a great way to look at it. And, saying that it's a long game it is, right? The bigger your backlist, the better the sales come and the more people you reach. And also having a series, that's a great way, word of mouth, keep building people recommending books. I find that word of mouth is still the strongest mover of books, I think, these
uh-huh.
days. And I love your approach to marketing. It play, right?
Hmm.
Look at marketing as another creative endeavor and just kind of play in it, because a lot of authors say marketing is the most difficult part for them. And there's a lot of
Hmm.
different avenues you can try. So just what you're doing, you're like choosing something, let me try that. Oh, that
Hmm.
didn't work so well. I'm going to try this. I'm going to take a course, educate
Hmm.
myself, and then I'm going to try
Hmm.
this. And oh, that works, and it's really just it's a game of trying things and discarding what doesn't work and what doesn't make you happy, and then finding the things that do click. So it sounds like you were on the right path. Well,
Right.
I'd love to see where you are after 12 books. We'll have to revisit the conversation
Right.
and look at the growth, because that's the long
Yeah.
game. Now, for you,
Great.
what has been the hardest part about being an author? But then on the flip side, what's been, the very best part of your author journey so far?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say the hardest hardest part is there's nothing like the terrifying feeling of hitting that publish button. I mean, so it was this combination of being terrified. It's like you're jumping off a cliff, but yet maybe jumping off a cliff naked because you feel so vulnerable. You're putting this thing that you created in your head out into the world for people to look at and say,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Oh, yes.
or get really into it, like, you know. So I'd say the vulnerability, there's a lot of like emotional ups and downs, especially if you're kind of paying too much attention to your, you know, constantly checking your sales numbers, and you're like feeling up when they're up and down when they're down. But I got over it, you know, I kind of got over that pretty quickly. And I think the performing aspect helped, because you know, in the circus, I didn't just do the shadow puppets. I did some other skits and stuff. I'm not that great at being on stage, but I got over my fear of it, because I'm like, nobody really cares. Who cares?
Yeah.
You know? And then I'd say the best part is knowing that people are reading my books and enjoying them, and that they're giving them a little bit of escapism, a little fun, a little thrills. Yeah, that's the best part. And once again, connecting with people through that, either fellow writers or readers or people in the horse world.
I love that you said that, because that you're getting great feedback and people are enjoying your books and finding that escape, because I hear through this interview you're an avid reader, and so am I. And you know, there's those moments where I shut books, or almost every time I read a book I shut it, and I'm like, wow, I'm so glad somebody wrote that so I could enjoy it or learn from it, or have this experience that I had. And us as authors, our books are doing that for other people. And you know, isn't that great? Like, you know, that feeling, and now you're giving it to other people. I think that is like really so beautiful. Like, if you think of it in those terms.
Yeah, like that somebody spent hours, however many hours it takes to read your book, in your world that you created from your imagination.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that.
It's pretty amazing. So thank you for being a creative contribution to people's joy of reading. Now, what advice would you give yourself if you could go back before you published your first book? Like, what would you say to yourself?
It's funny, because I'm not the kind of person that regrets the way things went. So I had to think about that.
Can you send a little jar of that over here? I'd like to have a little bit of that medicine.
I always think, you know, things happened the way they did, and we wouldn't be where we are today if it happened differently. But maybe done it sooner and done it faster. But also, I was learning, so I was going through that cycle of reading a little bit, trying a little bit, going back and researching a little bit. So I was teaching myself all along the way. So I'm not sure if I could have done it faster, but if I could have done it sooner, that would be my advice. But also, you know, you don't want to put something out that's not quite ready. So trying to study the craft of writing and getting feedback from other people was very important.
So no regrets, but I think the reason why you can say you have no regrets is because you really did the work. You educated yourself along the way. You wanted to do this right. And yes, we say we want to go faster, but you didn't rush. So you made sure you had a good product upon release. So I think that's great. So basically, your advice to other authors would be to make sure you understand what you're getting into and do the work to make sure you're doing it right.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, and usually in these interviews, I ask, you know, people, is there anything surprising that a reader of yours would be interested to learn? But I found something surprising on your website that I wanted to ask you about.
Oh, okay.
So you and your husband live off the grid on a homestead in the high desert of San Diego County. Now, that is really neat. Like, what's that like, and why did you make the choice to live off the grid?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to the circus, the kind of the timeline there. We ran a theater after the backyard. We kind of went to this bigger theater, and we ran this live theater for 3 years as a business. And we had not just our shows, but other people's shows, all kinds of shows, music shows. We even had a cat circus that came and performed there.
There's a book idea.
I know everybody's always like, why don't you write about the circus?
Right.
I'm like, yeah, there's a lot there. So anyway, after about 3 years, there was just a lot of, it was like an uphill battle. It was this 100-year-old theater building, but it was just constantly falling apart. We were doing so much maintenance to it. And I had created like a coffee cart, like an espresso thing. I was going to start a little coffee garden out in the side yard. And I'd gone through all the things and got the A from the county health board and everything. And then our landlord said, no, you can't have a coffee cart here. And it was so strange because I'm like, do you know what we're doing inside there? There's like acrobats hanging from the ceiling inside the theater, It's like, and I can't have a coffee cart. And also what had happened is my horse had died that year, just like a month before that. And I kind of didn't have the oomph to just keep fighting something. And we were kind of like, well, we did it. Let's close down the business and go on the road. We took this giant road trip and came back, and we kind of started living like nomads. So we lived a couple different places. We lived as caretakers at one place, and then we were camp hosts in the mountains at a private campground. And at the same time, I saw this piece of property for sale, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can afford that. We can have a permanent place that even if we keep traveling like nomads, we'll have a place that we can always come back to. And it was just 5 acres of raw land, no utilities. There are power lines nearby, but no well, nothing, just 5 acres at the base of Granite Mountain. And it was just the most beautiful place I don't know the most beautiful place in the world, but it was a place I'd always been drawn to in my travels around San Diego County. There's something about the desert that is so open and kind of inspires you to feel like anything is possible. And yet this was kind of like still in the foothills, a high desert, so it's not quite as hot as the desert. And I knew my husband could do anything. I knew he could make it work. So
if he had an outdoor circus or a backyard circus, when you got him, I'm sure he could do anything. Absolutely,
he can do just about anything. And so together we got a couple little trailers there. He built a deck. He built a roof over the trailer for shade. He set up solar. So we're completely off grid. Like I said, we don't have electricity. We have to be very, we do have electricity. It's solar, through our own solar system with solar panels, about 8 of those like car batteries basically to store the energy for nighttime. And we have a big water tank. We have water trucked in, water delivered. A lot of people do that in the West if they don't have wells on their property. So living with less to trade for freedom, I think we both love freedom. And it was like, wow, I pay for this. I have no rent, no utilities. Of course, we still pay for propane, water, we still have bills. It kind of provides that freedom of we can come and go as we please. And, we may not be able to run a coffee maker or a microwave without turning on the generator first, but you don't really need all that stuff. It's like you can make coffee in a French press or a percolator or whatever. As long as you have a flame on a stove, you can make your coffee. And so it's been quite a journey, and kind of, I don't know, it's something that's fulfilled a desire for me to have a place that I can call my own.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, what an adventurous life. I love the idea of like traveling around by having this piece of land that you can come back to and then have that freedom. I think that's so special. I think that's got to be really healthy for your creativity too, I imagine. What's next? I mean, obviously you just mentioned that you're writing a 12-book series, so that's going to take a minute, but like, what are you curious about? What are you thinking about? Where do you think you're going to be heading in the next little while?
Oh, there's a lot of things. Book wise, I'm curious about eventually going wide with my books. Right
Mhm.
now, I'm only on Amazon
Mhm.
and I'm in Kindle Unlimited, but I would like to eventually, I'm not sure at what point, maybe when the third book is out or maybe after that, put my books on other retailers.
Mhm.
I didn't want to do that at first because I was like, I've got enough like octopus arms to think about with independent publishing. I'd just
Mhm.
limit myself to one retailer, but I'd like to do that eventually. I'd also love to explore getting audio books of my books
Mhm.
done at some point because I'm a huge fan of audio. I get my eyes get tired, too much screen time, that kind of thing. So I love listening to audiobooks and I would love to have my books in audio. I don't think I would want to do that myself because I've looked at, just like on one page I'm like, oh, there's like 5 different voices and different accents and oh my gosh, it's like they're real pros, the people that do those audiobooks. Even if they don't seem like they're doing a voice, it's like they subtly change their voice to read the dialogue of one character or
Mhm.
another or whatever, and they're just so good. So yeah, book wise, I think that's what I'm curious about. I also just in life, the Pacific Crest Trail runs on the mountain right behind our place,
Mhm.
and I want to hike a section of that, a 10-mile section, which is like sounds like super easy probably for some good hikers, but I'd like to do that. My husband and I ride motorcycles kind of off road on some of the trails and things around here. Since I don't have a horse anymore, that kind of gives me that. It's not the same, but it kind of gives you that feeling of getting out in nature and just kind of exploring.
Mhm.
We're not like tearing up the sand or anything. We're just kind of putt-putting along the trails, and you see things that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. Other than that, also we're kind of talking about maybe moving back part time to the city just because we miss our friends. It's about an hour and a half drive to get back to San Diego from where we are,
Mhm.
and it doesn't sound like much, but when you do it on a long-term basis, it's kind of a drag. So we'd love to kind of just have a part-time place in the city. But, maybe start doing circus shows again.
Oh, fun. I mean, what
Yeah.
I'm hearing is you're just full on ready to embrace life and let it rock and
Yeah.
roll and just seeing what the possibilities are for having a very full life. I love that. I mean,
Yes.
that's really wonderful. I have
Yeah.
really, really enjoyed talking with you today, Valerie.
Oh,
Thank you for the
thanks.
gift of your time and sharing all this great stuff with us. And I'm so excited about your 12 book series. And I can't wait to keep in touch with you to hear how that's going. But in the meantime, would you let listeners know where they can find more information about you and your books?
Yeah. Well, I have a website. It's really easy to remember. It's valeriepower.com. If you want to read a little more behind the scenes stuff about the books or me, you can sign up for my mailing list there. And I also have a Facebook page, Valerie Power Author. Or you can email me directly at valerie@valeriepower.com.
Nice. And people can get a copy of your book autographed, I'm sure, or signed by you if they'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. And I will make sure to link to all those places in the show notes so you can get directly to Valerie and her books. And Valerie, thank you so much for the gift of your time. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Curly. It's been really nice talking to you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I hope you enjoy these Q&A sessions with wonderful equine authors who love all things horses and riding, just like me. Visit my website, carlycadecreative.com, where you can read the show notes, and make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support. Want a free guide to secrets of horsebook authors? Gallop over to carlycadecreative.com/wisdom to have author advice delivered instantly to your inbox. If you are an author who writes about horses and would like to be spotlighted, please let me know. Visit my contact page at carlycadecreative.com to fill out a request. I'd be happy to have you on the show too. Thank you for tuning in to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. See you next time. I'm your host, Carly Cade. Creative writing makes my spurs jingle.